It's the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. You've probably heard us say this on the show before. Michigan doesn't have enough homes. Various estimates say the state lacks about 100,000 units. There are various blockages to home construction. Restrictive zoning laws prevent mixed development. The permitting process itself can be slow. And there's a construction worker shortage in addition to a material supply shortage. As a result, developers are mostly constructing homes for wealthier residents. That's according to Joe Augustinelli. But the founder of Miller Johnson Growth Advisors says financing and better collaboration between local politicians and developers can increase the supply of housing. His group is speeding that process up with a new Grand Rapids riverfront project that includes offices, apartments, and condos. The Metro's Sam Corey spoke with Augustinelli on Mackinac Island at the yearly policy conference to learn more about how his group is constructing housing at a moment when it's become harder to build.
In May of last year, Michigan was in the process of building 22,000 homes. That put the number it needed to build still at over 100,000. How many homes does the state need to build to make housing more available and affordable for residents?
Yeah, and the number's over 100,000. I couldn't quote the direct number, but what we're seeing is this huge disconnect between the cost of constructing a house, the interest rates that are required to acquire and finance a house, and what people can afford. And so you're seeing the market forces, if left to their own devices, are really only building high-end homes right now in Michigan. And that's not what we need as a state. And so there's some great tools there that I'm sure we'll get into that we can talk about how to address that.
Yeah, I want to dive into eventually all of the problems with building and constructing and why it's so complex and why it takes so much time. But before we do that, I want to ask you, state and local leaders want hundreds of millions of dollars for affordable housing. They've been calling for that for some time now. People on both sides of the political aisle seem to be interested in this, but we still can't get things off the ground. We're still not able to speed up the process of constructing homes, constructing different types of homes. To the best of your understanding, what is going on there?
What's going on in Lansing is anybody's guess based on the day and the week, but I think there's maybe a misunderstanding around what the actual problem is and how do we get at addressing it. Mm-hmm. A lot of the people who are sitting in decision-making chairs, they already own their own house. They have their mortgage at 2.5%, and they're good, right? And they're not out there seeing new people trying to come into the market and really understanding that it is not the same game that we all played when we bought our first house 15, 20, 30 years ago.
There's a big generational divide.
I think there is, yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to get into, again, all of the different issues with constructing homes, but I do want to talk about your group, which is building a big complex in Grand Rapids. That includes a 21-story office tower, a 130-room luxury hotel, and a 43-story residential tower. The project is being built with about $560 million of tax subsidies. How were you able to get this project off the ground?
That project has been in the works for probably 4.5 years at this point, with a long-standing family in Grand Rapids has owned the property for years and tried to figure out really what's the highest and best use of that piece of real estate. And the determination was, let's think big, right? What could we really put here? The 3 towers with 600 residential units, a new hotel, condos, office space is the vision. That vision's really expensive to build. It's also probably the most difficult site to develop real estate on. 150 years ago, the Grand River ran through that property, and it was filled in, so just a lot of underground geotechnical challenges.
How were you able to get it through? How were you able to get it past state, local leadership?
Yep. So that program used the Michigan's Transformational Brownfield Program, which was approved through the City Commission and the MEDC, Michigan Strategic Fund, right before Christmas. How did we get it through? It was a lot of hard work. There was lots of community outreach and coalition building around building support for the project. At one point, we had to work through lobbying the legislature to increase the cap on the program, because early on, we had a project that worked. It worked with the TBP incentive, but the state was out of money. There were many bumps in the road on that project. Still probably many more to come before we see buildings topping out, but we're really excited about the vision how that fits in with the new amphitheater that just opened downtown and the soccer stadium that's under construction. It's just going to be an incredible project.
Is that part of why you think it was successful? There's a diversity to this project. There's so many different elements to it, and so there are a lot of different things that people could be excited about.
The beauty of doing projects in Grand Rapids is really the public-private partnerships that take place on largely everything that's occurred in the city over the last 30 years. Mm-hmm. There's a sort of community infrastructure that already exists of bringing the right players together. You know, I would credit Mayor Bliss to being really integral to bringing all the parties together, you know, at the state level and at the local level to get that thing across the finish line.
Okay. I want to get into all of the problems in terms of building homes because there are a lot of them. There are problems with supplies. The supplies are really expensive. There's problems with a labor shortage, makes that more expensive. Zoning laws are a big issue. There's permitting, which takes a really long time. Is it fair to say that those are the biggest issues when it comes to constructing affordable homes in Michigan? Those are the things that are blocking the construction of units?
I mean, I would say the challenge is permitting. From what we see with clients, that isn't the biggest problem that we're seeing. It's really availability of labor, cost of materials, the risk that's involved with putting millions of dollars of infrastructure in the ground to build a road with sewer and water to serve those new homes that we want to build, where the 2008 recession is still very fresh in the minds of home builders who made those investments in 2007. And
they didn't get their money back.
And then there was no market for the houses that they needed to build out of nowhere. And so that risk is really what's prohibiting a lot of these deals going forward, which is compounded by cost of construction, materials shortages, labor shortages, and interest rates have doubled in the last few years.
So how do you lower the risk then?
The beauty of Michigan's new tax increment financing program that the legislature created for housing projects is if there's a silver bullet out there, it's that. Because a home builder can go in and say, all right, if I go in and make this investment and I go vertical with a bunch of homes, if the bottom falls out of this, I still have a little bit of a backstop on my carrying cost on this project through the tax increment revenues that are generated by the project. And it incentivizes the developer to move more quickly because the TIF dollars become their incentive to develop the project more quickly. And in doing so, what we're seeing with our client base is you're seeing builders going into markets that they otherwise wouldn't, where the market's starving for new homes, but it's been so risky in more of your tertiary markets. And we're seeing this tool really unlocking development at an unprecedented rate right now, all across the state.
That tells me then that this is going to get better, that a lot more homes are going to be built because the risk has been at least somewhat diluted.
In the places where you have a willing community partnership. So the tax increment financing program requires the support of your local city council, county commissions in some cases, township boards. And some communities are embracing that and some are more hesitant, still trying to learn.
What are the places that are embracing it and why?
There's been a lot more absorption of this tool, I would say, in West Michigan, less so in Southeast Michigan. What we see is the consulting world of experts in this universe is more heavily concentrated in West Michigan than Southeast Michigan. So that's where the deals have been going. We were really excited to open an office in Detroit about a year ago and put our team on the ground and try to start pushing this program out into the Detroit metro area. But there's just a very, very large learning curve, and we're working through it. We're optimistic that it's going to help. But the problem is so very large right now. It's going to take many, many consultants like me, many home builders, to step to the table and make these investments to address the 100,000 unit shortage.
There's two more issues that I want to dive into. One is supply that we referenced earlier. Tariffs, I imagine, have made that worse. It was already a problem. Supplies were already costly. How have the federal tariffs impacted that?
We're seeing that more on the multifamily, the larger scale stuff. Steel tariffs, if you're building with steel, added a ton of cost to projects. That Grand Rapids project, we talked about it earlier, certainly is impacted. Home buildings, it depends where you're getting your lumber from, whether or not it's getting sourced,
If
through
you're getting
Canada,
it through Canada, I was going to say,
with tariffs or
tariffs.
not.
Yeah.
So that's been a bit of a mixed bag. Certainly anything that adds cost is not helping the situation. And when you have this sort of stacking of issues with, again, labor, materials, interest rates, none of it helps.
I want to talk about one of the issues that you haven't really mentioned a whole lot, which is zoning laws. A lot of people like the aesthetics of their neighborhood. They enjoy having a single-family home and single-family homes on their street and in their neighborhoods. But keeping those neighborhoods closed off to other types of housing, duplexes and triplexes and tiny homes and apartments, prevents the ability of developers to construct more units. And it could potentially lower the cost. But there's big blockages to change zoning laws. Should we change the laws so locals don't have as much control around housing so we can build more housing units?
Yeah, always been a proponent that local control should manage this issue. What's right for one community is not right for the next community. Everybody has their own issues. Those local elected officials, I come from a long background of local government elected officials, and I believe that they should be the one making those decisions, not the state. But there are going to need to be communities, and there are communities who are embracing different types of housing, more density, things like that.
I want to push on that because I want to bring in something you said earlier, which was the people who own homes right now are not the ones who need it, and they're older people. And so there's this generational divide. The younger people are the ones who need homes, probably are more likely to want to change those zoning laws, but they can't because they don't have the power. They're not going to city council meetings, what have you. They don't have the same leverage that older folks do. Do you not see, I guess, a tension there? The people who sort of are controlling the keys are the ones who don't want to change the zoning laws, and then, therefore, more housing isn't constructed in those neighborhoods.
I guess I disagree with the premise that all communities don't want to change the zoning laws. We're seeing lots of our clients developing properties that are the types of, diverse unit types with single-family homes and townhomes and duplexes and triplexes.
Including older neighborhoods and older cities, older municipalities.
We are seeing that, yes.
Can you give me some examples?
Let's see. We're working on a project in Oshtemo Township right now outside of Kalamazoo that is doing that. Our client's project would be the first one in this new sort of mixed unit type zoning district that's been created, and it's a really exciting project. It's probably 300 units in a relatively small township. We're working on a project right now in the city of Ionia that's similar to that, sort of your larger homes around the outside of the development with more dense development in the center. So there's ways you can address these issues if you have willing partners that want to sit down at the table and acknowledge that there's a problem that needs fixing.
Are there any communities in Southeast Michigan that are pushing for that, or is that maybe back to the older problem you're talking about of maybe Southeast Michigan not having the same expertise around constructing homes that West Michigan does?
Yeah, so I would say from our client base, we're relatively new to working in the Southeast Michigan market within the last 6 months. Can't put my finger on one that's getting at that zoning issue specifically off the top of my head. But the communities are out there.
I want to talk about one more problem. I know I talked about a few others. I said I only had two, but I actually have three, which is how much of the problem is simply federal? Meaning every time we build a lot of housing in this country, it's really come from federal subsidies. That was true in the 50s. That was true in the 90s. Do we need more assistance from the federal government in order to close this 100,000 unit gap that we have here in Michigan?
This is a problem that's solvable with money, so more money is helpful regardless of where it comes from. The federal government historically has been focused on loan mortgage guarantees and on subsidized housing through the low-income housing tax credit program, which is targeting that 60% of area median income and lower income band. And yes, we have a housing shortage there. We also have a housing shortage in the 80 to 120 AMI band, and that's your teachers, your nurses, your
people making $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year. Is that right?
Those people make too much money to live in a low-income tax credit subsidized development. and they also don't make enough money to afford market rate.
They're that
home.
missing middle.
That's that missing middle. That's really where the problem is. And federal programs historically haven't targeted that segment of the market, which is why I come back to this locally controlled tool that is targeting that missing middle.
This is somewhat of a promising sort of explanation here that we actually don't need the federal government on this one, or we can solve this statewide. We can solve this with our localities if we band together and collaborate a little bit and don't block construction of housing.
I think we can address some of the problem, yes. Is there enough capacity in just that tool to address all of the problem? Probably not. Can the federal government play a role in that? Certainly. I think there's a need to monetize these incentives. The federal government can play a role in providing low-cost debt into the projects. That would help tremendously. This was all much easier to do when interest rates were 3%. And as we're looking at 6.5%, 7%, 8% construction loans on these projects, that's just an enormous extra cost that certainly the public sector could play a role in.
Joe Augustinelli is the founder of Miller Johnson Growth Advisors. He spoke with the Metro's Sam Corey. It's the Metro on WDET. Coming up, the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution is just around the corner. On the Metro, that date has us wondering, what does it mean to be an American today? And how has it changed over time? We'll ask that question next, right here on the Metro. Stay with us.